Good evening. Begin with the verse of the Kesa. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, freeing all creations. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, freeing all creations. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, freeing all creations. The Gata of Atonement. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. The fragrance of this incense invites the awakened mind to be present with us now. The fragrance of this incense fills our room, protects and guards our minds from wrong thinking. The fragrance of this incense unites us. With precepts, concentration, and insight, we offer it for all beings. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. I go to the Buddha for guidance. I shall become one with the Buddha. I resolve that I shall each day follow the way of life he laid down for us to walk and awaken to his supreme wisdom. I go to the Dharma for guidance. I shall become one with the Dharma. The gates of Dharma are manifold. I vow to enter them all. The goal of wisdom is ever beyond. I shall attain it. I go to the Sangha for guidance. I shall become one with the Sangha. In the spirit of universal fellowship and as a member of the Sangha, I pledge myself to strive for the enlightenment of all beings. Excuse me. The Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upward to the skies and downward to the depths, outward and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, sitting or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into the world of suffering. May I be happy and well. May no harm come to me. May I learn compassion. May all my friends, family, and those I love be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those troubled in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those who have hurt me in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those I have hurt in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all my enemies be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all living beings be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. So we'll do a guided meditation now, and so don't forget as I started into the Dharma talk, it takes a little time between me saying something and you hearing it, and then you responding and it coming back. So if you've got questions that you want me to answer after the talk, feel free to go ahead and start writing them while I'm talking. So get into your meditation posture if you're not already. So we'll go fairly briefly and quickly through the guardian meditations, and then meditate on the breath. So the first of the guardians is mindfulness of the Buddha, recollection of the Buddha. And you can visualize the Buddha if you want to. But the important thing is to be aware of the virtues of the Buddha, and this is what you're trying to develop. This is why we practice wisdom, compassion, and purity of mind. So seeing reality as it is, understanding what leads to suffering and what leads away from suffering, and resolving to live according to that reality. And recognizing that we experience stress, difficulties, and others experience the same things. And so we're practicing to liberate ourselves and others. So with the objective of all beings being free from suffering. And purity, meaning that we let go of the habits of mind that bring us back to stress, create attachments and aversions, so that the mind becomes clear and pure. And the second of the guardians is goodwill. We want to be happy, free from animosity, free from stress. But more important, we want all beings to be happy. So take a moment just to send that, radiate that thought in all directions. May all beings be happy. third of the guardians is really mindfulness of the body. So just take a moment and really center your attention in the breath and the breath in the body. Scan your body from head to toe or vice versa. And if you want to get a little bit more advanced with this, you can recognize that the body is not the self. Form is emptiness. And the fourth of the guardians is to recognize that this is the moment we know we have. This is the only moment we know we have. So let's use this moment to awaken. So now turn your attention to the breath. Just find a place where it's comfortable to feel the breath. The tip of the nose is traditional, or the belly, or the chest. I like to use the belly. But you find a place where it's comfortable for you to stay with the breath, the sensation of breathing. So you can just rest your attention on the sensation of breathing. Or if you want to increase your concentration, your mind is very restless and you want to settle it down more, you can note your breaths. One traditional way to do that is by meditating on the word Budo, means awake. Bud on the in-breath, Do on the out-breath. Or you can count your breaths. Basically count your out breaths, breathe in, and as you breathe out, count 1. Breathe in, breathe out, count 2. And extend the number all the way through the out breath. not vocalizing it, but in your mind, just thinking it with the out breath. That helps keep your attention anchored to the breath through the whole duration. So try to stay with each and every breath. And then to sharpen your attention, focus on the entire breath from beginning to end. Really watch it carefully. Notice the in-breath begins, continues, feeling of fullness. The out-breath begins, continues, feeling of emptiness. And so watch each breath that way. Now begin to string the breaths together. The end of one breath becomes the beginning of the next. Like a string of beads, each bead is a separate thing, and yet each is connected to the next one and the one before it, and together they become one strand. Notice how the breath and the body and the mind interact. As the mind settles down, the breath becomes calmer. If you want to calm the mind, you can calm the breath. Body and mind and breath become more and more still. And you can meditate on this if you like. Just think, breathing out, calming the breath. Breathing in, calming the mind. To end the meditation, take a few deep breaths again. Be aware of where you are, your surroundings. The bell will ring twice. Gasho. Taking a moment just to bring wisdom and compassion together in one practice. And then take your time. When you're ready, open your eyes. The reading that I sent out with the meeting notice this week was from Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And the title of this chapter is Right Attitude, which is kind of interesting. It's about right attitude, but it's it's in the section called Right Attitude. The chapter is called Single-Minded Way. Suzuki writes, the Bodhisattva's way is called the single-minded way, or one railway track thousands of miles long. The railway track is always the same. If it were to become wider or narrower, it would be disastrous. Wherever you go, the railway track is always the same. That is the Bodhisattva's way. So even if the sun were to rise from the west, the Bodhisattva has only one way. His way is in each moment to express his nature and his sincerity. And then he goes on to say, we talk about a railroad track, but really there's no such thing, sincerity itself, as the railway track. The sights we see from the train will change, but we're always running on the same track. There's no beginning or end to the track, beginningless and endless track. There's no starting point, no goal, nothing to attain. Just to run on the track is our way. This is the nature of our practice. So what does that mean, you say? Railway track. I'm not going to answer that question yet. We'll sort of get to it. That's one of those things that I'd like for you to kind of investigate for yourself. And so we're going to talk about how to do that. So I've been thinking, I've been hearing from churches and stuff that it's going to be a while before anything reopens. So we'll probably be meeting together online for a while. Hard to say, but I'm here. I'm going to continue to be here. So I thought, well, what would be a useful way to spend this time together? And I thought something that we could do on Wednesdays that I think would be helpful would be really to kind of think about the idea of contemplative practice in general. And contemplative practice is sort of an umbrella term for a lot of things that all have, on the surface, maybe not very much in common, but underneath the surface or at their heart, sort of training the mind, how to use the mind skillfully. Contemplative practice, it suggests the idea of contemplating something, which it could be. You could be contemplating a scripture or something like that, but it's really using contemplation as a practice. Kind of think of it that way. So if you look at contemplative practices from the Buddhist perspective, I think you could say that it has to do with these the last three factors of the Eightfold Path. So there's kind of three main areas of activity that have to do with training the mind: right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So we let go of harmful or unhelpful mental phenomena, and we cultivate skillful, helpful ones. And we pay attention in a deliberate way, so we really kind of learn to use our attention deliberately and exercise control over our mental responses to things that come into our awareness. And so effort, mindfulness, and concentration are sort of the house of contemplation for mental development. You could put it that way. These are the tools that we use to develop an awakened mind. So most of the time, if you talk about contemplative practice, people will probably think of sitting on a cushion with your eyes closed, like we just did. But there's a lot of things that fit: walking meditation, qigong, archery can be done as a contemplative practice, flower arranging, making tea. Different traditions have different ways of training the attention in a way that it makes the mind more skillful. So there's a huge spectrum of this. In fact, if you Google tree of contemplative practice, you'll find an image that I think it comes from I think it originated with the Center for Contemplative Mind and Society. I'm not sure, which is a Christian-based organization that's kind of established to study and to promote contemplative practices. But anyway, you'll find this tree of contemplative practice, and it's got everything from martial arts to contemplative writing and meditation, obviously, and a lot of yoga and a lot of different things, if done as contemplative practices, can be contemplative practices. So that's not to say that shooting a bow and arrow is a contemplative practice, but it can be. So I thought it would be kind of nice to approach this idea of contemplative practice in sort of a global way over the course of a few weeks and look at different aspects of it. So to explain sort of what it is, the thing about why is this important. So, for one thing, I just saw this survey that was about young adults, came to me from a university chaplain somewhere, kind of in a string, about how chaplains are responding to the COVID pandemic and all that stuff. And the survey had talked about how students were doing and how college chaplains and spiritual offices and so on were helping them. And it was talking about how a lot of them were starting new spiritual practices or new contemplative practices and things like that. So it's kind of reinforcing the idea that, you know, chaplains, specifically with regard to this one study, but people in the spiritual teaching field, like myself, should might be talking to people who want to be doing more contemplative practices now, and how that is beneficial. So, so why? Why is that beneficial? If I ask people who come to our meetings in DeLand or show up for services at White Sands for the first time, why are you here? What are you looking for? An awful lot of them say they're looking for peace of mind. In fact, we have a couple of meetup groups, and we've had a number of new members in some of the meetup groups later. One of the questions is, what are you looking for? And a common answer is peace of mind. So life can be very stressful under the best of circumstances, and right now is not the best of circumstances. And so stress reduction is one reason that people will want to develop a contemplative practice. And then the second why is to increase happiness. We don't want just less stress. We want to feel good. We want to enjoy our relationships. We want to enjoy our life and that sort of thing. So that's kind of the next outcome that people are looking for when they start to practice. And then finally, and sometimes after these other things, people start looking for a way to connect with the sacred. And so that's kind of the third why. Why would you do this? You want to connect to whatever you identify as divine. That doesn't necessarily mean something supernatural, but kind of what is your sense of purpose? How do you find meaning in life? And so those are kind of all three of those really kind of work with this idea of developing the mind, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. So over the next few weeks, I thought I would sort of break it down in from the standpoint of why you would want to do it rather than a lot of hows. So today we'll focus on the stress one, reducing stress. So if you think in terms of daily life, this is really kind of the low-hanging fruit. It's probably the easiest one, which is good, because it's hard to develop happiness or an intimate relationship with the sacred if you're caught up in stress all the time. So, Suzuki, when he was talking about the way of the Bodhisattva, the way of the Bodhisattva is this connection to meaning. There's nothing more meaningful, I think, than to be a Bodhisattva. What is a Bodhisattva? One who's becoming a Buddha. That's literally what that means. And you're becoming a Buddha in order to liberate all beings, right? So really you're trying to be one with Buddha. Not trying to be one with Buddha. You are being one with Buddha. That's what happens when you practice that way. So to get there, though, you first kind of need to learn how to train your mind so that your mind is not just all over the place, grabbing onto whatever looks interesting and creating a lot of stress. So you can learn the basic stress reduction stuff fairly easily and quickly. Mindfulness-based stress reduction is one that a lot of people know about. It's a clinical application of basically practices that came from Buddhism. And they get pretty good results teaching people about it in an 8-week course. And there's some other stuff. It's not just meditation. There's some body work, yoga, probably. And there's some sort of self-help psychology tools that they teach you to learn how to use, I think based on cognitive behavior therapy. But the foundation of it is the kind of meditation we just did, and the meditation where you're meditating on how your body feels and that sort of thing. It doesn't take 8 weeks to learn that. You just did the basis of it just a few minutes ago. So, but 8 weeks of practice shows some results usually, right? If you come at it with the right attitude. So the right attitude, this is important. And Suzuki talked like I said, that came from the section on right attitude. What kind of, you have to bring a certain state of mind with you to the practice. Some of you are old enough to remember Charles Atlas. And maybe, I don't know, maybe those ads are still around. They used to run in the back of comic books and Mad Magazine and stuff. When I was a kid, just about every comic book had an ad in the back for this exercise program. And in the ad, there was this, what was described as a 98-pound weakling who was getting bullied on the beach by a, this sort of musclehead kind of guy. And then he goes home and he orders the Charles Atlas bodybuilding course. And the course said that only 15 minutes a day, you could have these miraculous results. And so after 15 minutes a day, he goes back to the beach. He's all pumped and ripped now. And he punches the bully and wins his girlfriend back and all of that, and proves what a man he is. All right. So it's kind of funny stuff. Contemplative practice is not like that. However, meditating 15 minutes a day, you will actually get some benefit. It's not instantaneous, though. It takes some time. And the benefits are maybe a little bit more subtle than you might expect. So a lot of meditation teachers, if somebody asks, what am I going to get out of meditation? They'll say nothing. Because if you come at it with the attitude of wanting to get something out of it, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure, because you're going to be looking for something that you may not get. You may get something that you needed even more, So it's kind of interesting. You need to come at it with the idea that I'm going to train my mind, and then see what happens and how it's going to change. The benefits, and recognize that the benefits come a lot more from dropping stressful mental patterns than they do from some sort of mental gain. It's the same thing, but it's different in some ways that are a little bit unusual, a little bit hard for some people to quite grasp. So, and it does take time. So going to the gym, you're not going to walk out of the gym pumped up after one workout if you're in lousy shape, right? It takes a period of time to do anything with that. And so, and meditation and contemplative practices in general take some time, some effort, and some practice over time. So some of these things are 2,500 years old now. We know they work because people have been continuing to do them for 25 years and talking about how to do them, and there are people walking around who are examples of that. But they've actually fairly recently been studied by science. When we developed things like the fMRI, the functional MRI, we became able to see how meditation affected the brain, for example. And so we've learned that if you focus attention on your breathing, the way we did, with some regularity, your prefrontal cortex actually becomes stronger. And so we don't know for sure exactly what that means, but there's a lot of things like that where we can see where meditation actually physically changes the organ itself. But it sort of goes beyond that. It changes the way you engage, the way we engage with what arises, what comes into our attention, what comes into our life. So when we talk about meditation, we talk about meditation for stress release and stuff. I want to focus on the idea of deliberately paying attention. So the three forms of mind training that Buddha taught, he used the term sati, which is usually translated as mindfulness. There are several aspects of this, and there's some kind of related concepts, and there's that sort of overlap. And so when you start reading about it from a Buddhist perspective and then reading about it from the sort of contemporary psychology perspective, it can get a little confusing because mindfulness gets described and defined in different ways. But I think to kind of cut to what's simple is that we're really learning to skillfully pay attention. So mindfulness is a meditation technique, but it's also a way to pay attention to the way the mind engages with life. So when we're not paying attention to anything in particular, when we're grocery shopping and letting the mind wander, our awareness tends to gravitate toward danger. For example, the dog, I'm paying attention now. But I noticed the one thing that I did notice is that the dog is growling. One of the dogs is growling. And so the mind kind of wants to go there and see what's going on, right? So I'm paying attention to what I'm saying. That still becomes a pretty strong attractor. If I'm not paying attention deliberately, if I'm just going for a walk and just letting my mind wander, that's where it's going to go right away, and it's going to stay there and examine that and analyze that, right? So when we're not paying attention deliberately, then the mind tends to move towards stressors, and if there's not a stressor, it'll find one. So think about being in the grocery store, checking out, and the person in front of you, or the person behind you, maybe is probably a better example, won't stay 6 feet away and isn't wearing a mask and is probably sniffling and, is just not paying attention, right? So your mind is immediately going to go to that if you're not paying attention deliberately and if you're not practicing mindfulness in your life, and start looking for reasons to get mad at that person, right? So you could just as easily be pleased with the fact that there's 10 other people around you who are wearing masks, and they put up a screen to protect people at the grocery store, and they've got the lines on the floor to try to keep people apart. And most people are following the guidelines. Most people are being careful. No, the mind wants to go to this one person who's not. And they're probably really not a threat. They're probably really far enough away that they're not a problem. But even so, you start coming up with these shoulds. Yeah, you should do it. You should act like that. You shouldn't act like this, and so on, right? So I'm not a neurologist. My understanding of this is pretty superficial, but as I understand it, this has to do with kind of the network of regions in the brains and what's reacting, what's lighting up, what's active at different times and what's not. And so that particular network, the one that judges things and all of that, is kind of where we determine where our self is. So when we think about ourselves, when we judge others relative to ourselves and so on, that network is active. And that's a big source of stress. But meditation, like the one we just did, tends to change the way this network activates. It affects different parts of the brain. So paying attention deliberately takes us out of that network and into one that's generally more positive and engages with experience in more pleasant ways. So if you want to reduce stress, you learn how to train your attention, which makes the mind calmer and clearer. And then we get some space between what comes into our awareness and how we respond to it. So I want to kind of personalize this and give you a chance to think a little bit about your own experience. So when we were meditating earlier, I want you to think back over that. And usually if I ask people, what was your meditation like? I'll get answers. So ask yourself, what was your meditation like? So did you notice any desires, any clinging come up, anything like that? Any desire to get up and go do something else, or start wondering what you were going to snack on before you went to bed, or a song that you like start playing in your head, or anything like that, anything that's sort of sensually related to sensual desire? Or did any animosity or ill will or annoyance or anything like that came up? Did you get ticked off when my dog started barking at the possum outside, for example? Did that bug you? Did you become restless? Was there any anxiety, any impatience, anything like that? Did you notice you were sleepy or bored or just kind of feeling lazy? Did you have any doubt or emotional resistance? This is a natural one, a common one. People will go, I don't know if I'm getting anything out of this. I don't know if I'm getting anywhere. Maybe I'm a lousy meditator. My mind is too restless, and this isn't doing me any good. Those things are all common, and they're all stressors. And if you're observing them in your meditation, they're probably appearing in one form or another as stressors in your daily life. Everyone experiences them. And so when you meditate and you notice them and you can name them as that, there's restlessness, there's ill will, there's laziness, right? Then you're beginning to train the mind, right? If you recognize it and you let it go, you recognize it as what it is. It's not something real. It's not something you have to react to or do anything with. Then that's the kind of one of the first steps in training the mind. So if you've been listening to me talk for any length of time, you've heard me say this before. If you continue to listen to me talk, you're going to hear me say it again. Your experience of life, whether it's good or bad, pleasant, unpleasant, and all of that, has very little to do with what happens to you. Circumstances are essentially neutral. It has a great deal to do with where you're putting your attention. So if I had gone, I'm so glad if I had to go through this, that I'm going through this now. Because if I'd gone through this pandemic 20 years ago, it would have driven me, I would have gone nuts. Because I just hadn't developed that ability to pay attention that skillfully yet. I was working on it, but not anywhere near to the extent that I have now. So, you can work with this stuff and experience less stress, whatever kind of circumstances you're in. So what you pay attention to grows. So if your attention goes to stress, anger, restlessness, those kinds of things, and you focus on those things are going to tend to dominate your experience. That doesn't mean that if you start meditating, you're going to stop getting angry or doubtful or restless or any of that stuff. If you have a tendency to experience those things, they're still going to arise. But you get better and quicker at letting go of them and shifting your attention in more skillful directions. And so with practice, if anger arises, if that's been a problem, it's going to arise less often because you're not feeding it. It's not growing because you're not giving it attention. So I'll give you an example. I have this thing. It's a neurological anomaly, kind of a disorder, I guess. I don't know. It's called misophonia, selective sound sensitivity. And basically, when I hear certain sounds, I get an extremely negative reaction to them. So I'm not going to tell you what sounds because I'll be in the same room with some of you someday, and I don't want you to be self-conscious and worrying about whether you're making a noise that's bugging me. But when I first started experiencing it, it tends to first show up in childhood. I would get really angry about some of the sounds that some people made, and that went on for a long time. I would think, why is that person doing that thing? Don't they know how annoying that is? They're trying to drive me crazy. Really getting very irrationally angry response to that. And this syndrome was identified fairly recently, I think within the last 10 years. And scientists started to study it, and there's really not much you can do about it. It's a neurological thing. It's not, it's not conditioned. Well, it's not conditioned in the way we talk about psychological conditioning. It's conditioned in the way we talk about conditioning in Buddhism. There's a whole other Dharma talk there. But there's not really anything I can do about it. I can't prevent the feelings from arising. There's no rationality or irrationality associated with it, except that I can become aware of my feelings as they arise. And then I can put some space between the feeling that arises and my response to the feeling. It's not a matter of responding differently to the sound. That kind of bypasses the thinking part of the brain and goes straight to the part of the brain that wants to, react very strongly to something. But I can notice that, and I can change where I go from there, right? So this angry thought arises, or this angry feeling arises. Instead of feeding that, I can let that feeling just kind of be there in the background and not build on it. So you can develop that skill too. Hopefully you don't have misophonia, but it's not difficult to put that idea to use. So first thing is to remember, there's not some technique that's going to make it easy. You can expect some difficulty. That's good. If you're struggling, it means that you're working on it. Frequently, people will tell me about the problems they're having with meditation. There was a meeting fairly recently, not too long before everything started to shut down, and this woman was complaining that she didn't think she was meditating properly because she was feeling pain and her mind was jumping around a lot. But actually, that was a really good sign. When she sat, she was able to notice more of what was going on in the mind and body. And that's the first step in that, is to notice, be more aware of what's arising in the mind and body. And then the next thing is to notice how your attention changes with response to that. So going back to this word mindfulness, mindfulness means being aware, being fully in the present, but it's more than that. Paying attention to what you're paying attention to is kind of a good way to look at it. So we can use that to work with stressful emotions when they arise. And so first, just observe what has arisen and accept ourselves with that emotion. So don't judge yourself for having a particular feeling. Feelings are not really ours to control. We can't make feelings arise. We can't make feelings not arise. They just do it. Same with thoughts. You can't just say, I'm going to sit and not think for 5 minutes. You're going to have to really work at it, and it doesn't work very well. So what is more productive is just note what has arisen and accept that it has arisen. And then second, observe how we continue to generate thoughts that maintain that feeling or create other stressful emotions. Right? So the sound situation that I was talking about. Before I knew better, I might think, oh, this person is doing this on purpose and they shouldn't do that, and they're trying to drive me nuts, or they don't care, or whatever. So that's just kind of adding thoughts to something that's already unpleasant. I might have used this analogy recently, but I'll repeat it. The Buddha had a conversation with somebody someone had said something to him that kind of hurt his feelings. And so this monk, or whoever it was telling the Buddha about it. And he was talking about how, going into a lot of detail about it and adding on to it, and what a rotten person this was. Why did they do this to me, and they shouldn't act this way, and all this kind of stuff. And the Buddha said, wait, stop. So they did this thing that was wrong, right? The guy said, yeah. So think of that as an arrow. You got stuck with one arrow. If you get stuck with an arrow, does that hurt? And the guy said, well, yeah, of course that hurts. What if you get stuck with 2 arrows? Well, that hurts twice as much. Well, you keep sticking yourself with arrows over and over and over again because you keep reliving this thing that happened. So we don't compound the suffering by continuing to add thoughts and layers of interpretation and all that kind of stuff. And then we start letting go of those thoughts that have compounded our stress. We notice them, we let them go. We don't try to force the emotion away. We just stop adding the layers of stress to it, and shift our attention away from that. And then fourth, the unpleasant feeling that has arisen, we just coexist with that. And then you can just sort of relax into the gaps between the stressful thoughts about it. Let those thoughts go, let those feelings go when you can, accept what you can. And then kind of the last thing is to look at the values reflected in those thoughts that led to our unhappiness, and begin to cultivate values that lead us toward fuller, freer lives. And that's the point where we get on that railroad way that is going to take us, that is the Bodhisattva path. When we start seeing what our true values are, right? What our bigger meaning and purpose in life is. We can turn to that once we start letting go of all that little stuff that's keeping us hung up. So we'll go into a little bit more of that meaning and purpose side of this in a week or two. But in the meantime, let me get my phone and look and see if anybody's asked me any questions. Nobody has asked me anything. I'll give it another minute or so. And while that's happening, I'll just remind you that tomorrow on Zoom, we have a more conversational meeting. We're looking at a couple more verses of the Dhammapada, and those went out with the meeting reminder this week. So if you don't have that, let me know. And Saturday, I'm going to White Sands for the first time in what seems like forever. I know it's really just been a couple of, I guess it's been just about 2 months now since I was there. And it's the Buddha's birthday service. And some of you I know have been handwriting excerpts from the Lotus Sutra, and we'll be burning those ceremonially to offer them to the Buddhas. And if you haven't already sent them to White Sands, if you've done some and you want to know what to do with them, you can go to White Sands, I guess, but we're only going to let like 10 people at a time into the meditation hall. So there's a real good chance. I mean, so I wouldn't go there because there's a good chance you won't be able to get inside. And you know, if you're outside, I'll talk to you from 6 feet away. But if you want to try to get some to me, email me. I'll tell you how to do that. Otherwise, they'll apparently be live streaming it or trying to. I'm going to take my video camera too and videotape it. So if the live stream doesn't work, I'll upload it later. So I don't see any questions, but feel free to join us tomorrow night or Saturday or Sunday at 11 a.m. And until then, we'll do the dedication of merit. Buddha nature pervades the whole universe, existing right here now, and offering flowers, candles, and incense, hearing the Dharma and training the mind, great merit is attained. We dedicate this merit to the great Master Shakyamuni Buddha, the all-pervading and everlasting three treasures, to the 16 guardians and all protectors of the Dharma and their relations throughout space and time, to all ancestors of this Sangha and all beings in the Dharma world. May penetrating light dispel the darkness of ignorance. Let all karma be resolved in the mind flower bloom in eternal spring. May the Dharma body maintain strength and health, and years of life be lengthened for all teachers of this Sangha. May their vows be fully realized, and may they live in perfect peace with Buddha Dharma. We pray for all those suffering from violence, those who grieve for them, for those living in oppression, for all who are in prison who should be free, and for all refugees from violence, hunger, and catastrophe, man-made or natural. We pray for the health and well-being of all those suffering from diseases of body, mind, or spirit, all those working toward the healing of those afflictions. We pray for those suffering from COVID-19, those working to protect and treat them, those grieving for those lost to this pandemic. At this time, we have members of our congregation, friends and loved ones suffering from diseases of various kinds, and some grieving for lost loved ones. We pray for them and send loving thoughts their way. May they be serene through all their troubles, and may we realize the enlightened way together. Sabe sata sadahantu avera sukha jivino katang punya phalang maham sabe bhagi bhavantu te. May all beings always live happily, free from animosity. May all share in the blessings that spring from the good we have done. So thank you all very much. I look forward to seeing you, hearing from you.
Until then, be good.
Three vows. Have a good night.